All abandoned the paralyzed Apache beauty. Only the retired sheriff chose to savor the sun was just beginning to rise over the quiet desert town, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink. The streets were empty, and the air carried a gentle stillness that only mornings like this could bring. Birds chirped quietly in the distant trees, and the faint sound of wind rustling through dry grass filled the town with a calm rhythm. It was in this peaceful morning that the story of the Apache beauty quietly began to unfold, though no one in the town yet knew how important it would become. At the edge of the town, in a small run-down corral surrounded by weathered wooden fences, a horse struggled to rise. She was tall and had once been magnificent, with a shiny coat that caught the sunlight and eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of the desert. But now she was a shadow of her former self. Her legs trembled as she tried to stand, and she fell back onto the soft sand with a quiet, pitiful whinny. The horse had been abandoned after an accident had left her paralyzed in part of her hind legs. For weeks, maybe even months, she had survived on scraps and rainwater that collected in shallow containers. The neighbors whispered about her, shaking their heads sadly. Some said she would not last long. Others said she should have been put down, but no one had done anything to help her. Among the people in the town, many had seen her from a distance. They knew her story, how she had once belonged to a local rancher, a proud stallion they had called the Apache Beauty because of her fiery spirit and graceful movements. She had been known for running freely across the open fields, galloping faster than the wind. Children would watch her from fences, imagining what it would feel like to ride such a magnificent horse. But now, she was confined to a tiny pen, her spirit dimmed, and her body weak. She had become invisible to most people, a sad reminder of how quickly life could change. The retired sheriff, John Miller, lived a few streets away. John had spent nearly 40 years in law enforcement, protecting people, solving problems, and standing up for those who could not defend themselves. Though he had retired, his heart had not grown smaller. If anything, it had grown more compassionate with age. But he was the kind of man who noticed details others overlooked, like the way someone's eyes carried fear or sadness, or in this case, the quiet struggle of a magnificent horse left to fend for herself. One morning, while John was having his cup of coffee and reading the local newspaper, he noticed a small, almost unnoticed article tucked into the corner of the page. Bud. It mentioned the Apache Beauty, describing her abandoned state and how she had been left to suffer after her injury. The words struck him like a spark. He felt a familiar pull in his chest, a feeling he had often experienced in his years as a sheriff when he had seen injustice and suffering. He could not ignore it. Without wasting time, John grabbed his jacket and drove slowly to the corral where the horse was kept. As he approached, he could see her lying on the ground, her body trembling slightly, her eyes watching him with a mix of fear and curiosity. But she did not recognize him, of course. But there was something in her gaze that told him she had not completely lost hope. He parked his truck and walked carefully toward her, keeping his movements slow and calm so as not to frighten her further. The horse shifted slightly as he came closer, lifting her head to watch him. John stopped a few feet away and spoke in a gentle voice, introducing himself as a friend. He did not rush to touch her. He knew that trust was earned, not demanded. Days of neglect had left her wary of humans, and any sudden movement might frighten her so much that she would retreat into herself completely. He could see the ribs under her coat, the dirt caked on her hooves, and the sadness in her eyes. But he also saw something else, the faint glimmer of strength, the spark of life that had not yet been extinguished. John spent hours just sitting near her that first day, talking quietly, offering small pieces of bread, and occasionally scratching behind her ears. He noticed that when he spoke softly, her ears would twitch, and she would lean slightly toward him. These small gestures were victories. They told him that she had the will to survive, and that perhaps with care and patience she could regain some of the life that had been taken from her. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, John made a decision. He would not leave her here to suffer. He knew it would be a long journey filled with challenges and uncertainties, but he also knew that no effort was too great when it came to saving a life. He would find a veterinarian to examine her, provide her with proper food, and work tirelessly to help her regain strength. And most importantly, he would give her kindness, patience, and the respect that she deserved. Word of John's actions began to spread slowly through the town. Some people shook their heads in disbelief. "Why bother with that old horse?" they whispered. "It's too late for her." Others watched quietly, not sure whether to support him or dismiss him as someone chasing a hopeless cause. But John did not let their doubts shake him. He had faced danger and despair in his career, and he knew that courage and compassion often meant standing alone at first. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the desert sky in brilliant shades of red and gold, John returned home. But his thoughts remained with the Apache beauty. He could not stop thinking about her trembling legs, the way she had lifted her head at the sound of his voice, and the quiet resilience in her eyes. That night he made a plan. He would start with small steps, build her trust, provide medical care, and slowly help her regain mobility. He knew it would take time, perhaps months, maybe even years, but he also knew that the reward of seeing her recover, of giving her a chance at life again, would be worth every moment of effort. The retired sheriff went to bed that night with a sense of purpose he had not felt in a long time. For years he had helped people, but now he realized that sometimes life called for a different kind of protection, saving those who could not speak, who could not fight for themselves, who depended entirely on human kindness. The Apache beauty was one of them, and John was determined not to let her down. The following days marked the beginning of their journey together. Every morning John would visit her, bringing fresh water and soft hay. He would speak to her in calm tones, gradually introducing gentle touches. At first, she flinched, hesitant to trust. But day by day, she began to relax. She started to follow his movements with her eyes, nuzzle his hands, and even attempt to rise with his support. But each one a triumph. Neighbors began to notice. Some were curious, watching from a distance as the retired sheriff dedicated himself to this once-forgotten horse. Some began to admire his dedication, and slowly, a sense of hope began to ripple through the town. The story of the Apache beauty was no longer just about abandonment and despair. It was becoming a story about patience, trust, and the power of compassion. And so, in the quiet mornings and golden sunsets of the desert town, the bond between a retired sheriff and a paralyzed horse began to grow. It was a bond built not on convenience or reward, but on unwavering determination and heartfelt care. John Miller had chosen to act when others would not, and in doing so he was about to change the life of the Apache beauty forever, and unknowingly, the hearts of many in the town as well. The journey had only just begun, but already it was clear that this was no ordinary story. It was a story of hope, resilience, and the extraordinary ways that human kindness could transform a life that seemed lost. The Apache beauty, abandoned and broken, had found a guardian in the retired sheriff, and together they would face the challenges ahead, one careful, patient step at a time. The days that followed John Miller's first visit to the Apache beauty were both challenging and inspiring.
He woke every morning with a single thought on his mind. He had to help her.
The retired sheriff had always been used to facing difficult situations during his career, but this was different. This was not about law or rules. It was about life itself, fragile and precious. The horse, once full of grace and spirit, was now fragile and cautious, and helping her would test John's patience, dedication, and heart. On that second day, John returned to the corral before sunrise. The air was cool, and the desert was quiet, except for the distant calls of birds and the soft rustling of dry grass. He parked his truck and slowly approached the horse. Breath. She was lying down, her head resting on the warm sand, and she lifted her eyes toward him with a mixture of curiosity and fear. The first thing John noticed was how thin she had become. Her once shining coat was now dull and covered in dust, and her legs, weak from weeks of neglect, trembled even as she tried to shift her weight. John knelt down a few feet away and spoke softly as he had the day before.
Good morning, Beauty. It's okay.
I'm here to help you. His calm voice seemed to reach her. Slowly, she lifted her head and nuzzled toward his hand, testing him. John smiled quietly, knowing that this small gesture was the first sign of trust he had earned. Trust, he reminded himself, could not be rushed. It was something that had to grow, little by little, just as the desert grew its wildflowers after a long winter. The retired sheriff had already contacted a local veterinarian, Dr. Martinez, who was known for her skill with large animals. But she arrived later that morning with a small medical kit and a gentle manner. She examined the horse thoroughly, checking her paralyzed legs, her diet, and her overall health. Her expression was serious, but not hopeless.
She's weak and has been neglected for a long time, Doctor.
Martinez said, but she has a strong spirit. If we start care now, with proper nutrition and support, she has a chance to regain some mobility.
John felt a surge of determination. The veterinarian's words confirmed what he had already sensed. The Apache beauty was not beyond help. She needed care, patience, and hope, and he was ready to give all three. Together, they began to plan her rehabilitation. John learned how to help her stand carefully, how to support her legs, and how to prevent further injury. Every step was slow, deliberate, and careful. The horse sometimes resisted, unsure of this new routine. But John never forced her. Instead, he rewarded every small effort with soft words, gentle pats, and a calm presence. Feeding her was another challenge. Weeks of neglect had left her weak and cautious about eating. John brought fresh hay, grains, and water, carefully monitoring how much she consumed. Desk. He would spend hours beside her, speaking quietly, showing her that food and safety could exist together. Slowly, she began to eat more confidently, leaning closer to him and even allowing him to brush her dusty coat. Breaths. These small victories were monumental. Every flick of her ear toward him, every gentle nuzzle, was a sign that trust was forming. The townspeople were watching, some skeptically, some with quiet curiosity. Many could not understand why a retired sheriff would dedicate himself so fully to helping an animal that others had given up on. "Why bother?" they whispered. "She's old, paralyzed, and probably won't survive." But John paid them no mind. He had spent a lifetime protecting those who could not protect themselves. To him, the Apache beauty was no different. She had a right to life, dignity, and care, and he would not abandon her. As days turned into weeks, John faced new challenges. The horse's legs were unstable, and simple movements were exhausting for her. He experimented with gentle exercises, supporting her with blankets, ropes, and soft harnesses to help her stand without falling. Some days were frustrating. She would resist, tremble, or fall back, and John had to remind himself to be patient. He spoke to her calmly, saying, "It's okay, Beauty. We'll take it slow." "You can do this." Sometimes he would sit beside her for hours, simply being present, letting her know she was safe.
John also began documenting her progress. He took notes on her daily behavior, her eating habits, and her reactions to different exercises. He photographed her standing with support for the first time, capturing the moment as a triumph of willpower and trust. Each small improvement brought hope not only to John, but also to anyone who followed her story.
These records would later serve as a testament to what dedication and care could achieve.
Despite these efforts, there were setbacks.
One morning, the Apache beauty refused to stand, shivering with fatigue. John knelt beside her, gently stroking her face and whispering encouragement. "I know it's hard, but you're stronger than you think. We'll try again, slowly." With patience and guidance, she eventually managed to rise, though unsteadily, her legs trembling beneath her weight. That moment, though simple, was a victory. John felt pride and relief, knowing that perseverance was paying off. Over time, their bond deepened. The horse began to recognize John's footsteps, lifting her head and pricking her ears when he approached. She would follow his movements with her eyes, showing curiosity and even playfulness at times. John found himself talking to her as he would an old friend, sharing memories of his career, lessons he had learned, and simple stories of the town. Though she could not understand words, she understood tone, kindness, and presence. John's dedication began to inspire others. A few neighbors brought fresh hay, blankets, and water to help her. Some offered advice or shared their own experiences with animals. Slowly, the narrative in the town shifted from skepticism to quiet admiration. People started to see that saving the Apache beauty was not just about one horse. It was about compassion, patience, and the power of a single person to make a difference. The retired sheriff also learned important lessons during this period. He realized that healing was never just physical. It was emotional, too. The Apache beauty had been abandoned, neglected, and afraid, and it would take time for her to trust humans again. John had to remain consistent, calm, and gentle, showing her every day that she could feel safe, cared for, and loved. He often reflected on his career, recognizing that courage and justice were not always about enforcing rules. They were about protecting the vulnerable and standing for what was right.
Evenings became moments of quiet reflection.
John would sit beside the horse, brushing her coat and whispering words of encouragement. He sometimes thought about the road ahead, knowing that her recovery would be slow and uncertain. Yet the progress they had made so far filled him with hope. Each day brought new challenges, but also new rewards. Seeing her attempt to rise, eat with confidence, or respond to his voice reminded him why he had chosen to embark on this journey. The Apache beauty, too, began to change. She started showing glimpses of her old spirit. Her eyes, once clouded with fear and uncertainty, now sparkled with curiosity. She would lift her head when John approached, follow his movements with careful attention, and even make small sounds of excitement when she saw him. Though her body was still weak, her spirit was beginning to recover, and that was just as important. As weeks turned into months, John became more confident in handling her care. He experimented with gentle exercises designed to strengthen her legs, using supportive harnesses and soft ropes. Each successful attempt, no matter how small, was celebrated quietly. He would take notes, photograph her progress, and adjust her care routine based on her reactions. Every small improvement brought joy, hope, and a deeper connection between man and horse. Through it all, John never lost sight of why he had started. The Apache beauty had been abandoned, left to suffer when no one else cared. But he had chosen to act. He had chosen to bring hope, care, and trust where there had been only neglect and fear. And in return, he discovered something profound, that saving a life, no matter how fragile, was one of the most rewarding experiences a person could have. the town began to take notice. Stories of the retired sheriff's dedication spread, inspiring others to consider how they could make a difference in their own small ways. People began to understand that acts of kindness, even for animals, could ripple outward, touching hearts and changing perspectives. The Apache Beauty was no longer just a forgotten horse. She had become a symbol of perseverance, trust, and the transformative power of compassion. By the end of Part 2, the foundation of their journey was firmly in place. John had earned the trust of the Apache Beauty, created a safe environment for her care, and begun the slow process of rehabilitation. Every day brought challenges, setbacks, and triumphs, each teaching patience, empathy, and the importance of unwavering dedication. And though the road ahead was still long and uncertain, both John and the Apache Beauty had taken the first steps toward healing together, proving that even in the face of abandonment and fear, hope could flourish when someone chose to care. As the weeks turned into months, John Miller's bond with the Apache Beauty grew stronger, but so did the challenges. Caring for a horse that had been abandoned and left paralyzed was not an easy task. Every day required patience, energy, and creativity. Yet, despite the progress they had made together, not everyone in the town understood or supported what John was doing. Some neighbors watched him from a distance, shaking their heads in disbelief. "Why waste your time on that old horse?" they would whisper. "She's weak, and it's too late to help her." Others murmured that he was chasing a hopeless cause, that the money, time, and effort could be better spent elsewhere. But John had never been one to let doubt or criticism stop him. He had faced dangerous criminals, life-threatening situations, and impossible problems during his career as a sheriff. If he could handle those, he could handle this. The Apache Beauty, meanwhile, was beginning to show more of her old spirit, though her body was still fragile. Some days were difficult. She would struggle to stand, her legs trembling under her weight, and sometimes she would fall back into the sand. John never scolded her. Instead, he would kneel beside her, speak softly, and encourage her gently.
"It's okay, Beauty," he would say.
"We'll try again. You're strong, I know you can do it." Slowly, she began to trust him more, leaning into his touch and responding to his voice. John also had to face practical challenges. The horse needed proper equipment to support her legs and allow her to move safely. There were no standard solutions for a paralyzed horse, so John improvised. He built harnesses and supports from ropes, blankets, and soft padding. He tested each one carefully, making sure it did not hurt her, and he adjusted them as she grew stronger.
Every new piece of equipment was a small victory, a tool that gave her a chance to regain mobility and independence.
Veterinary care was another challenge. Martinez visited weekly to monitor the Apache Beauty's health and progress. She helped John create a rehabilitation plan that included gentle exercises, a balanced diet, and careful monitoring of her legs, breaths. Some exercises were simple, like encouraging her to shift her weight from one side to the other. Others were more complicated, requiring harnesses and ropes to support her while she tried to walk. Each exercise required patience from both the horse and the retired sheriff. Sometimes she would resist, afraid of the movement or unsure of her strength. John would sit with her, speaking quietly and providing reassurance until she felt confident enough to try again. Despite all his efforts, John began to notice a pattern. While he and the Apache Beauty made progress together, the town itself remained indifferent. People offered advice but rarely helped. Some criticized him, saying it was foolish to invest so much time in a horse that might never fully recover.
A few neighbors even tried to convince him to give up, warning that the horse would eventually die no matter what he did.
Breaths. Yet John refused to be discouraged. He knew that patience, consistency, and love were the keys to success. He had faced skepticism before and had learned that actions spoke louder than words.
Over time, a few townspeople began to change. They watched as the Apache Beauty slowly gained strength, taking small steps with the support of her harness.
They saw how dedicated John was, how he spent hours each day caring for her, and how gently he treated her. Some began to offer supplies, fresh hay, water, or blankets, quietly helping without drawing attention to themselves. Others started asking questions, wanting to learn how they could help animals in need. While many remained indifferent, these small gestures of support showed that compassion could spread, even in a town that had seemed unconcerned. John also noticed changes in the horse's behavior. She was becoming more confident and curious. She would follow his movements with her eyes, respond to his voice, and even make soft whinnies when he approached. Her trust in him was growing. One morning, as John helped her stand with the support of her harness, she took a shaky step forward. It was a small step, but to John it felt monumental. Breaths.
He smiled, softly praising her. Good girl, Beauty.
See? You can do it. Bait. Her ears flicked forward, and she nuzzled him, a clear sign that she was beginning to believe in herself again. Even with these successes, John knew the road ahead was long. Great. Each day brought new challenges. The harnesses required careful adjustment. Exercises had to be repeated patiently, and her diet needed to be balanced to restore strength without overwhelming her weak body. There were days when she resisted, when her fear took over, and John had to remind himself to stay calm. He had learned that frustration or anger could set back weeks of progress. Patience, kindness, and consistency were far more powerful tools than force. John also began to reflect on his own journey. Caring for the Apache Beauty reminded him of the challenges he had faced during his career. He had spent decades protecting people, solving problems, and facing danger. Yet this was different. Here, the challenge was not about control or authority. It was about compassion, understanding, and connection. He had to read the horse's body language, understand her fears, and respond with empathy. In many ways, it was harder than any crime investigation he had ever led because there were no rules, no guidelines, and no immediate rewards. The only results came slowly, over weeks and months, in small victories. Despite the indifference of some townspeople, John found encouragement in the horse's progress. Her small steps, her growing trust, and her soft nuzzles reminded him that his efforts were not in vain. He kept careful records of her progress, noting the days she managed to stand, take steps, or eat without fear. These records were not just for him. They were a reminder that dedication and care could create change, even when the world seemed indifferent. There were also moments of quiet joy. John discovered that the Apache Beauty had a playful side. When she felt comfortable and safe, she would nuzzle his hand or try to chase small shadows in the sand. Her spirit, though still fragile, was emerging. John often laughed quietly, feeling a warmth in his heart that he had not experienced in years. These moments were small, but they mattered more than any praise or recognition from the outside world. John's commitment also began to influence his own life in unexpected ways. Caring for the Apache Beauty required discipline, patience, and creativity. He had to wake early, plan meals, adjust exercises, and maintain equipment, purpose, and structure, filling his days with meaning. In return, he received the quiet, unwavering trust of a creature who depended entirely on him. It was a relationship built on mutual respect, care, and hope. Even as some townspeople remained skeptical, John knew that the Apache Beauty's recovery could inspire others. Her story was not just about a horse. It was about the difference one person could make when they chose to act with compassion.
John began to share small updates with neighbors, showing them the progress she had made.
While some still doubted, others began to listen, learn, and even offer help. Slowly, the community started to realize that dedication, patience, and kindness could have a ripple effect, touching hearts far beyond the immediate situation. As part 3 of their journey unfolded, it became clear that the challenges were far from over. The horse still needed months of care, careful rehabilitation, and support. But the bond between John and the Apache beauty was stronger than ever. She trusted him, responded to his gentle guidance, and began to regain the confidence she had lost. And John, in turn, had discovered a deeper sense of purpose, realizing that acts of care, no matter how small or unrecognized, could transform a life. The retired sheriff often reflected on the lessons he was learning. He had spent a lifetime upholding justice, solving problems, and protecting people. But this experience taught him that courage was not always about facing danger. It could also be about standing firm in the face of indifference, dedicating oneself to a cause others might dismiss, and believing in the potential for life to heal. In helping the Apache beauty, he had found a new mission, one that required patience, empathy, and unwavering commitment. By the end of part 3, the stage was set for the next phase of their journey. John had earned the trust of the Apache beauty, established a routine of care, and begun to navigate the indifference of the town. The horse was growing stronger, both physically and emotionally, and their bond was deepening. Small victories, like the ability to take steps with the harness and respond to his voice, showed that progress was possible, and though challenges remained, hope was alive, for both the retired sheriff and the once abandoned horse who had begun to trust again. Breath. Together, they faced the indifferent town, the fragile body, and the slow path to recovery.
Each day, step by step, they were rewriting what was possible.
The Apache beauty, once abandoned and forgotten, was becoming a symbol not only of resilience and courage, but also of the profound difference one person's dedication could make in the life of another being. The sun had begun to rise over the desert town, casting a golden glow across the corral where John Miller and the Apache beauty spent their mornings. The horse had come a long way since the days of fear and abandonment. Her coat, once dull and dusty, now glimmered faintly in the morning light, and her eyes held a spark that had been missing for months. She was still cautious, her legs unsteady, but the small steps she had taken with John's support marked the beginning of a remarkable change. It was early in the morning when John first noticed it. As he approached the corral, the Apache beauty lifted her head, her ears pricking forward at the sound of his voice. Psst. Today, she didn't just nuzzle his hand or follow his movements with her eyes. Today, she took a stronger, more confident step toward him, her legs supported by the harness he had carefully built over weeks of trial and error. John's heart leapt. This was more than progress. It was a breakthrough. He knelt beside her, whispering encouragement. "See, beauty? You're doing it."
I knew you could. Over the next few days, John focused on building her strength and confidence.
He created a daily routine of gentle exercises, carefully designed to challenge her muscles without causing strain. She began to stand for longer periods, shifting her weight from one leg to another, testing her limits slowly and cautiously. The harness that had once been a necessary crutch now seemed to serve as a bridge, helping her regain some independence while still offering support. Dr. Martinez visited as usual to monitor her progress. She smiled as she watched the horse take deliberate, cautious steps. "John," she said, "I've seen many horses in poor condition, but I've never seen one with a spirit quite like hers. Psst. She's remarkable. Keep doing what you're doing. Patience and consistency are the keys." John nodded, feeling both pride and determination. Breaths. He knew that recovery would take time, but he also understood that the horse's spirit was just as important as her physical strength. The breakthrough was not limited to physical improvement. Emotionally, the Apache beauty had grown stronger. She no longer flinched at every movement, and she had begun to trust John completely. She would follow him around the corral, responding to his gentle commands and soft voice, breaths. Sometimes she even displayed moments of playfulness, nudging his hand or pawing the ground gently as if to say, "I feel safe now." These moments were small, yet they were proof that trust, once broken, could be rebuilt with care and patience. John also began documenting their progress more carefully. He took photographs and notes, recording each new step, each successful exercise, and each sign of growing confidence. He shared these updates quietly with a few supportive neighbors, hoping to inspire others to see that dedication and compassion could create real change. Slowly, the town's attitude began to shift. While some remained indifferent, others were inspired to offer help. Fresh hay, blankets, or even a few encouraging words. The Apache Beauty's story was becoming more than just a tale of struggle. It was a story of hope, determination, and the power of human kindness.
One morning, John decided to try a longer exercise.
He carefully guided the Apache Beauty across the corral, supporting her legs with the harness while she took tentative steps. At first, she was hesitant, unsure if she could manage the distance. But John spoke to her calmly, encouraging her with each movement. Step by step, she moved forward, her confidence growing with every successful motion.
By the end of the exercise, she had walked farther than she ever had since her injury. John couldn't help but smile.
"You're amazing, Beauty," he whispered.
I'm so proud of you. The progress inspired John to think bigger.
He began planning ways to help the Apache Beauty regain even more independence. He experimented with new exercises, sometimes letting her move short distances without the harness, while staying close to prevent falls. He also improved her diet, adding supplements recommended by Dr. Martinez to strengthen her muscles and support overall health. Every improvement, no matter how small, was celebrated as a victory. As the horse's abilities grew, so did her presence in the town. People who had once ignored her began to take notice. Some watched from a distance, curious about her progress. Others came closer, offering gentle encouragement or asking John for advice on caring for animals in need. The story of the Apache Beauty was spreading, inspiring people to reconsider how they viewed abandoned or disabled animals. John, who had once faced skepticism, now found quiet support growing around him. Despite these successes, challenges remained. The horse's legs were still weak, and she could not yet move freely without assistance. Some days were frustrating. She would resist exercises, stumble, or tire quickly. John learned to adjust his approach, breaking exercises into smaller steps and celebrating every small achievement.
Patience, he realized, was as important as strength.
The journey was not just about recovery. It was about building confidence, trust, and resilience. One afternoon, a neighbor approached John, curious and impressed by the horse's progress.
"I didn't think she would make it," the neighbor admitted quietly, "but look at her now."
"You've done something incredible."
John smiled, feeling a quiet sense of fulfillment. Then,
"She's the one who's incredible," he replied. "I'm just here to help her remember how strong she really is." The conversation reminded him that the Apache Beauty's journey was not just about survival. It was about reclaiming life, dignity, and spirit. The emotional bond between John and the horse deepened with each passing day. She would follow him across the corral, respond to his voice, and show signs of comfort and happiness that had been absent for so long. John found himself talking to her not just about exercises, but about life, about hope, and about the lessons he had learned over the years. Though she could not understand words, she understood tone, consistency, and kindness, and her responses reflected that understanding. John also began to involve the few supportive townspeople more actively. He shared tips on caring for animals, demonstrated gentle rehabilitation techniques, and explained how patience and empathy could make a difference. Slowly, a small network of helpers began to form. They were not many, but they were committed, and their contributions, hay, blankets, and encouragement, made a noticeable difference in the Apache Beauty's daily life. The community, once indifferent, was beginning to recognize the power of dedication and care. One day, during an exercise session, the Apache Beauty surprised John. With careful guidance, she took several steps without needing the full support of the harness. Her legs wobbled, but she managed to move forward confidently. John's eyes filled with tears, and he whispered softly, "You did it, Beauty. You really did it." It was a milestone, a moment that marked the beginning of a new chapter in their journey. For months, progress had been slow. But now, the horse was showing signs that she could regain more of her independence than anyone had expected. As her strength improved, John noticed changes in her personality as well. She became more curious, exploring the corral and reacting to sounds with interest rather than fear. She began to interact more playfully, nudging John gently or pawing the ground in excitement. The spark that had once defined her spirit as a young, proud horse was returning, slowly but surely. John felt a sense of pride and joy that words could not fully capture. Breakthrough had another effect as well. The town, which had once dismissed the horse as a lost cause, began to see the power of determination and compassion. People were inspired by John's dedication and the horse's resilience. Even those who had once criticized or doubted him began to offer quiet support. The Apache Beauty was no longer just a horse. She had become a symbol of hope, courage, and the impact one person could make by refusing to abandon a life in need. By the end of Part 4, the Apache Beauty was walking more steadily with her harness, eating with confidence and showing signs of growing strength and independence. John had created a safe and supportive environment, built a trust that had seemed impossible months before, and inspired a small but meaningful change in the town. Together, they had overcome fear, doubt, and neglect, proving that patience, consistency, and compassion could work miracles. The breakthrough was not just physical, it was emotional and social. The horse had regained confidence, the town had begun to support her journey, and John had discovered a renewed sense of purpose. Every small victory, each step, each moment of trust, each sign of playfulness was a reminder that change was possible when dedication and empathy guided every action. Looking ahead, John knew there was still work to do. The Apache Beauty was not yet fully independent, and her legs would need continued care and rehabilitation. But he also knew that the foundation had been laid. The bond they had formed, the trust they had built, and the small but growing support from the community meant that the horse's future was no longer defined by abandonment and neglect. In the quiet desert mornings and golden sunsets, the story of the Apache Beauty was unfolding as a testament to hope, resilience, and the extraordinary impact one person's dedication could have. John Miller, the retired sheriff who had chosen to act when others would not, had guided her toward a new life. And in return, she had reminded him, and the town, of the strength that could be found in trust, patience, and unwavering care. Months had passed since John Miller first discovered the Apache Beauty abandoned and paralyzed at the edge of the desert town. The horse, once weak and fearful, had transformed remarkably under his careful care and unwavering patience. Her coat now gleamed under the sun, and her eyes sparkled with a lively curiosity and quiet intelligence. Her legs, though still needing support at times, had regained strength, allowing her to take steps with a confidence that had been unimaginable when John first met her. Every day had been a journey, filled with small victories, setbacks, and moments of doubt, but the results were undeniable. The Apache Beauty was no longer the forgotten, abandoned horse she had once been. She had become a symbol of resilience, hope, and the power of human kindness. John arrived at the corral early one morning, carrying fresh hay and water. The Apache Beauty was already standing, her head raised, ears forward, and tail gently swishing. As he approached, she nickered softly, a sound he had come to recognize as a sign of trust and recognition. "Good morning, Beauty," John said, smiling as he stroked her neck. Are you ready for today? She stepped closer to him, nudging his hand as if to answer yes. Over the past weeks, John had gradually reduced her reliance on the supportive harness he had built. He had learned to read her movements carefully, knowing when she could attempt steps independently and when she needed assistance. Each day she grew stronger, walking farther distances, balancing her weight more steadily, and showing signs of growing confidence. The breakthrough had been slow and steady, but now the results were remarkable. John could see her spirit shining through in every step, in every gesture, and in the joyful way she interacted with him. The horse's transformation did not go unnoticed. Word of her recovery had spread throughout the town. People who had once doubted John's efforts now watched with admiration. Neighbors who had ignored her plight began stopping by to see the progress, bringing supplies or simply offering encouragement. Some spoke quietly to John, admitting that they had been wrong to dismiss the situation and praising his dedication. These gestures, though small, meant a great deal to him. They were signs that the power of compassion could inspire change, not just in one life, but in an entire community. One afternoon, John decided it was time for the Apache beauty to experience more freedom. He led her to a small open field near the edge of town, a place where she could move without the limitations of the corral. The grass was soft and green, and the air was filled with the scent of wildflowers. For a moment, the horse paused, her eyes wide with wonder. She had spent so much time confined, relying on support and guidance, that the sight of an open field filled her with a mixture of curiosity and hesitation. Brass by her, whispering encouragement, and then gently guided her forward. Step by step, the Apache beauty moved across the field. Her legs wobbled at first, but she adjusted quickly, gaining confidence with each stride. John walked alongside her, never forcing, always supporting with calm words and gentle hands. After a few minutes, she began to trot slowly, a movement that once seemed impossible. Her mane flowed in the wind, her ears pricked forward, and her eyes shone with pride and joy. John's heart swelled with emotion. "Look at you, beauty," he whispered, tears forming in his eyes. "Brass, you did it. You're free." The sight of the horse moving independently touched not only John, but also the few townspeople who had gathered quietly to watch. They had come out of curiosity, but they were witnessing something extraordinary. The transformation of a creature who had once been abandoned and left to suffer. Apache beauty was no longer a symbol of neglect. She was a symbol of hope, resilience, and the extraordinary impact that one person's dedication could have. John continued to care for her with the same patience and consistency that had guided their journey from the very beginning. He maintained her daily exercises, provided balanced nutrition, and ensured she had a safe environment. But now their relationship had grown deeper. The horse no longer needed constant support. She trusted John completely, responding to his voice, gestures, and even his mood. Their bond was profound, built on months of shared struggle, care, and trust. As the horse's strength and confidence grew, John began to think about the future. He realized that the Apache beauty could now inspire others. She could show the town and beyond that even the most fragile and abandoned lives could recover with care, patience, and love. He shared her story with neighbors, friends, and anyone willing to listen, emphasizing that every life, no matter how small or seemingly hopeless, deserved a chance. People began to offer support in different ways, donating supplies, helping with care, and spreading the story further. The Apache Beauty's journey had become a community effort, fueled by compassion and inspired by the example set by John. There were moments of reflection, too. John often stood quietly in the field, watching the horse graze or trot, thinking about how far they had come. He remembered the first day he had found her lying in the sand, weak, frightened, and alone. Back then, the task had seemed impossible, and many had doubted him. But through patience, determination, and a refusal to abandon her, They had both grown stronger. John realized that their journey had changed him as much as it had changed the horse. He had discovered a new kind of purpose and fulfillment, one that came not from authority or power, but from care, empathy, and the willingness to act when others would not.
The Apache Beauty herself seemed to sense the significance of her recovery.
She displayed moments of joy and playfulness, running across the field with a freedom she had not known in months. She would nuzzle John's hand or follow his steps eagerly, showing not only physical strength but emotional confidence. The timid, frightened horse who had once flinched at every movement had become a proud, spirited creature once again, capable of enjoying life and expressing herself fully.
As the seasons changed, the horse continued to thrive.
Her progress inspired not only John but also those who had witnessed her transformation. Breaths. Children would come to the edge of the field, amazed by her strength and beauty, learning lessons about compassion, patience, and the rewards of helping those in need. Neighbors began to recognize that their small acts of kindness, bringing hay, offering water, or simply showing interest, could make a difference. The story of the Apache Beauty was spreading quietly, becoming a beacon of hope in the town. John often reflected on the lessons of their journey. He realized that true courage was not always about facing danger or enforcing rules. Sometimes courage was about refusing to give up on a life, showing up every day with patience and kindness, and believing in the potential for recovery and trust. He understood that his dedication had not only saved the horse physically, but had also nurtured her spirit, restoring confidence and joy that had been lost. In the evenings, John would sit beside the Apache Beauty in the field, brushing her coat and speaking softly. These moments were quiet but profound, a time of connection and reflection. The bond between them was unspoken yet undeniable, built on months of shared struggle, care, and triumph. John often thought about how many lives, human or animal, were abandoned or neglected, and he felt a renewed commitment to help wherever he could, using the Apache Beauty story as a reminder of what could be achieved with patience and compassion. One day, John led the horse to the town center for a small gathering. People had been curious about her progress for months, and now they could see firsthand what dedication and care could accomplish. Children and adults alike marveled at her strength and confidence. John spoke gently to the crowd, explaining her journey and the importance of never giving up on a life in need. The Apache Beauty stood proudly beside him, calm and confident, a living testament to resilience and hope. The impact was immediate. Peace. Conversations in the town began to change. People spoke more about helping abandoned animals, offering support, and noticing those in need. The Apache Beauty had become more than a horse. She was a symbol of compassion, a reminder that change was possible when someone chose to act with care and dedication. John's efforts, once questioned and doubted, had inspired a community to open their hearts and see the difference one person could make. Even as the horse thrived, John continued to provide careful care. He monitored her diet, maintained her exercise routine, and ensured she remained healthy and strong. He also continued to document her progress, capturing photographs and notes that told the story of transformation, from abandonment and fear to confidence and vitality. These records were not only a testament to her recovery, but also a source of inspiration for others who might face similar challenges.
The story of the Apache Beauty's journey reached beyond the town.
People shared her story online, in newspapers, and through local networks. Her recovery became a symbol of hope for abandoned and disabled animals everywhere, a reminder that with patience, love, and dedication, life could be restored and spirits could be healed. John, once a quiet, retired sheriff, became an example of the extraordinary impact one person could have when they chose to act with empathy and courage. By the end of the story, the Apache Beauty could walk and trot confidently across the fields, enjoying the freedom she had once lost. She had regained not only her physical strength, but also her spirit, trust, and joy. John had not only saved a horse, but had also inspired a town, taught lessons about patience and compassion, and found a new sense of purpose in life. Together, they had proven that even the most fragile lives could be transformed when someone refused to give up. The Apache beauty was no longer abandoned, no longer weak, and no longer invisible. She had become a living symbol of hope, resilience, and the extraordinary results of human kindness. And John Miller, the retired sheriff who had chosen to act when others had turned away, had shown that a single person's dedication could change a life, inspire a community, and leave a legacy that would endure far beyond any one moment. In the quiet desert mornings and golden sunsets, the horse would run, play, and stand proudly, her spirit alive and strong. John would watch her, a gentle smile on his face, knowing that every effort, every moment of patience, and every act of care had been worth it. Together they had faced fear, indifference, and uncertainty. And together they had created a story that would be remembered not for tragedy, but for courage, compassion, and hope.